Greetings. We're in the end of Genesis 46 and going into 47. Joseph has just brought his family down to Egypt. They're few in numbers, and so there's apparently in Jacob's mind at this point, Israel's mind, as he's sometimes frequently called here now. In Israel's mind, it's a threat. My family is still very small, and here we are going into a foreign land. Mm-hmm. So he must have been thinking and praying about all of this at this moment. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting the way it all develops. In the immediate, in the beginning of all of these arrangements, when they get down there, Pharaoh and Joseph arrange for something that is providentially wise, although they couldn't have known it clearly at the time. What would be the outworking of this little movement to make a plan that works for the Egyptians and for the Israelites in Egypt? So we're starting at 46:28.
Yes. Then he sent Judah before him to Joseph to point out before him the way to Goshen. And they came to the land of Goshen. So Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel. And he presented himself to him, and fell on his neck, and wept on his neck a good while. And Israel said to Joseph, Now let me die, since I have seen your face, because you are still alive. Then Joseph said to his brothers and his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh, and say to him, My brothers and those of my father's house who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. And the men are shepherds, for their occupation has been to feed livestock, and they have brought their flocks, their herds, and all that they have. So it shall be when Pharaoh calls you and says, What is your occupation? That you shall say, Your servant's occupation has been with livestock, from our youth even till now, both we and also our fathers, that you may dwell in the land of Goshen. For every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians.
So Joseph went in and told Pharaoh, My father and my brothers, with their flocks and herds and all that they possess, have come from the land of Canaan. They are now in the land of Goshen. And from among his brothers he took 5 men and presented them to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to his brothers, What is your occupation? They said to Pharaoh, Your servants are shepherds, as our fathers were. They said to Pharaoh, We have come to sojourn in the land, for there is no pasture for your servants' flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. And now please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, Your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them settle in the land of Goshen. And if you know any able men among them, put them in charge of my livestock. Well, you have to remark on the kindness of Pharaoh, who was definitely reciprocating Joseph's benevolence toward the Egyptians, as well as his own family.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of how this arrangement at the time is convenient for the Egyptians as well as for Israel. Israel needs land for their flocks and livestock for sure, but this prejudice the Egyptians have.
Yeah, it's recognizing that. And yet, in a way, the fact that they're kept separate, and Joseph might have had this in mind too, is a protection, because the Egyptian life and lifestyle would be fraught with all kinds of temptations or things that would be in opposition to what they're supposed to be doing and believing.
Right. So the possible infection,
Yeah.
and then we should think about this as witnesses, don't we? Don't hang out with the world because you might get infected. Well, the possible infection actually happens. We learn later, especially in Ezekiel, that they did adopt some of the Egyptian customs and tastes and even
worship.
Gods.
Yeah.
We learn that later, but at first everything seems to be just about set up right. Now we're separated from them, but on the Egyptian side, it looks like racial animosity or hatred. But on the on God's side, it's a separation that's necessary to create a people who are holy, because that's the root meaning of the word holy is separation. They can't be a holy people to bless other people unless they are separated.
Which doesn't completely come true until they leave Egypt. When he takes them out of Egypt, there's a reason why he wants them there to grow as a nation, to become great, but also to leave because they need to be separated from. So sometimes separation is a good thing.
Well, this is a good, not only a period, but a place, a good place for incubation. If we're going to keep the child safe until it's grown to maturity, physically anyway, population-wise, then we've got to have a place where that can happen with some stability. And at that point, Pharaoh and Egypt represent the most stable place on earth. And it happened that way.
Yeah. I did want to remark on the first section of this, when he meets his father, I couldn't help but think of my own situation with being separated from my family for so long, that I would hope that this would maybe one day happen for me, a reunion like that. And I can just imagine, it says he wept on the neck for a good while. I can imagine that would be the case if I was reunited.
We're all praying in that direction, love.
Thank you. And so pray for your families. Don't just give up.
Yeah. Here's a quote from Calvin about this principle of separation. We should state it very strongly in this generation of wokeness, that not all separation is racial segregation or racial hatred. Separation can have a worthy goal. So Calvin says, it would not have been difficult for them to become invested with offices at court. How then does it happen that Joseph knowingly and purposely exposes his brethren to an ignominy, that is, hatred, which must bring dishonor also on himself? I should say, better than hatred would be shame, ignominy, which must bring dishonor also on himself, except because he was not very anxious to escape from worldly contempt. So, in other words, Joseph doesn't care what the Egyptians think about him and his family, really.
He's not interested in prestige and a place in Egypt.
But this works to their advantage, as Calvin says. To live in splendor among the Egyptians would have had at first a plausible appearance, but his family would have been placed in a dangerous position. Now, however, their means and contemptible mode of life proves a wall of separation between them and the Egyptians. Yes, Joseph seems purposely to labor to cast off in a moment the nobility he had acquired, that his own posterity might not be swallowed up in the population of Egypt, but might rather merge in the body of his ancestral family. If, however, this consideration did not enter their minds, there is no doubt that the Lord directed their tongues, so as to prevent the noxious admixture and to keep the body of the church pure and distinct. By the way, Calvin, being the proto-Calvinist, thinks in terms of Israel as being the original church or congregation of the Lord, right? And he's right.
Yeah. So it didn't succeed in keeping them pure, because when they leave, they have adopted a lot of
Egyptian ways.
But it was a measure in which to keep them somewhat separated from the Egyptian, even while they were there.
But then he has to bring them out, and he has to bring them to Sinai, where he's going to make them into a holy nation, a people for himself, his own inheritance. Yeah. What's our link?
Was the separation of Israel from Canaanites a plain case of racial hatred? That's the way we would read it today. So we never see a benefit to any kind of separation. But in the church, there is a measure. It's not segregation, it's separation. Oftentimes people don't want to hang out that don't have the same morality or the same interest or the same devotion. So, many non-Christians aren't going to want to hang out with Christians necessarily if they find their thinking so different than their own. Doesn't mean they have to be at each other's throats. It just means they don't always keep company.
Yeah, I think we all observe some form of this.
Mm-hmm.
See you next time.
Yeah.